What is a commercial property? In this video, I am going to share with you some of the fundamental concept about commercial property. So if you don't know anything about commercial property, then this video is must for you. So watch till the end. Okay, the commercial property, to understand a commercial property, you need to look the fundamentals. And if you have been investing already into real estate, then you will be able to understand easily. Let me break it one by one. First of all, what is a commercial property? Commercial property is a property where the commerce happens, where the business is happening. Similar to residential property, a residential property is something where a principal place of residence for someone. If you look around, you see that, okay, there are houses, there are apartments, there are strata title units. Everything is residential properties. Same thing is for commercial property as well. Just like you see the house where people are living, it's called residential property. A same house where somebody is doing business can be a commercial property. Now, commercial property, of course, it will be looking something different, depends on what type of business they are doing. If they are doing any kind of warehouse, then it is going to be a warehouse type of building. If there is an office work that is happening, that's called office space. If there is a petrol station, then it's specialized. So that's the fundamental thing is that, okay, what type of building. Whenever we talk about commercial property, the first thing is that, it is too risky. Let me put this into risk. What do you mean by risky? And you said the first question that comes into vacancy. Okay, let's break it down. Vacancy means that there is no business happening in that. So there is no business are not interested to take your space. So the question that you will be asking is that if they're not taking your space, what about the other spaces? Is the business happening in the other spaces in that area? If it is happening, there is some problem with your property, which is why people are not taking. Sometimes you might think of, okay, reducing the rent little bit, further bit, somebody will take that building. So the vacancy problem will be solved. Perhaps you are adamant that, no, I want this much of rent and without that I will not do this. Same problem does exist in residential property as well. Because in residential property, in your mind, you are thinking, okay, no, there is no vacancy because there are housing crisis. If there is housing crisis, means there are people who wants to take up the space in that area, wants to live in that area. If that happens, means those people, they need to do business, right? There are businesses needed for these people. They need to eat, they need shops. They need to go to fill the fuel, so there is a petrol station. They need to go and any kind of home improvement things. So for that, there is a home improvement shop. They need to go to Bunnings, there is a Bunnings needed. So as long as there are people living, there are residential property, hence there are commercial properties as well. It goes side by side, hand to hand. Now, next part is that when you talk about that vacancy, if there is a residential property vacancy, there will be a chance of having commercial property vacancy. If there is no vacancy in the residential property, chances are there are commercial property also not vacant. Do you know right now, there are places where there is a housing crisis. Same thing is there as well in the commercial space, because there are commercial property crisis. People are ready to take up that space if somebody wants to move out, and that's not happening. Hence they are struggling, they are looking for somewhere else. If your property, if the commercial property which is lucrative, which is in a place which is a nice area, in a corner junction, or even in the shopping center in a nice place, your property will remain tenanted for the rest of your life. And that is possible. Just like you think about the residential property, think the same like a commercial property. It is absolutely, the fundamentals remains the same. So remember, as long as people are living in that area, there is a need for residential property, and as long as people are living in that area, there is a need for commercial property as well, because the business has to happen to make sure these people gets what they need. Now, let me put it another perspective of what's the difference between residential and commercial, and why commercial property is so lucrative. Residential property, you say that yes, it is going to be tenanted. The first question is, who are these tenants? In general, these are low socioeconomic people. They either can't afford to buy their own home, or they just, some people, let's say very small percentage, they don't want to buy because they do reinvesting and all sort of things, so eventually they are renting it. Now, most of the cases, about 70 to 80% cases, their circumstances are that they are low socioeconomic, they cannot afford to buy something that they want to, hence they are renting. So paying rent is the last thing that they do, because yes, it is something that they have to pay, but it's not like something that like if they just want to move out to another place, because moving out from one place to another place is like few $1,000s, $4,000-5,000 maximum. Let's say you can just your lease is expiring, you say, yeah, I don't want to stay, take all your stuff and go to another place and rent it out. So the vacancy what you talk about in residential property, it is also possible, I think, particularly if you have residential properties and in some of these areas where sometimes the tenant, this the last 2-3 months they didn't pay, they just move out. And while you can chase up and all, it's just not worth it, because 3-4-5,000 they might not have paid the rent, but you have to pay, after paying the insurance, you can claim the insurance and all sort of hassles just for a couple of thousand or 3,000 or 5,000. You might not chase it and you're busy with your life, and eventually you see that you lose that money. Versus commercial property, first of all, the lease is long term. It is not like a 6 months, 1 year lease. Who are these tenants? The tenants are doing the business. They generally have their own house. They generally, well-to-do people. They're doing business. Their livelihood depends on them. So their utmost interest is to pay the rent. If they do not pay the rent, they cannot do the business there. If they cannot do the business there, they cannot make money. So because their livelihood depends on that, their utmost interest is to the pay rent first. Plus, upkeep the property, because if the property is not good, depends on what kind of property it is, they will not be able to do business. The customer is not going to come. If think about in a shop and which is ugly and which is not looking good, or things are everywhere, it's messy, it's smelly, would you like to go there? No, you don't want to buy. So it is their interest to make sure, as a tenant's interest, to make sure the property is good, so that you would be able to go there. With that fundamentals, commercial property is more lucrative, because tenant is going to take care, tenant is going to pay the rent on time, as compared to residential properties where you will see that tenant will not pay unless you force them to pay, and sometimes if they can't pay, they will just move out. Another part in residential property you need to understand is the government backing, because government's rules are getting changed more and more. It is more of a tenant whose favor everything, because government get votes more from the tenant, right? Because there are more tenants than the landlords. Hence, government will protect them. So the more and more it is becoming the government dictated lease, and it's in the tenant's favor. What I call sometimes tenants friendly lease. That does not happen in commercial property, because there is no government who is dictating, oh, this is the way the business rule needs to be done. It's up to the landlord to decide what kind of lease will be written and what kind of terms and condition, and if the tenant does agree, well and good. If they don't, you find another tenant. There is no government backings. So in that front also you are winning, because in commercial property it is more of the landlord driven or landlord friendly lease rather than a tenant friendly lease in residential property. So now the fundamentals. Another fundamentals is to earn money. If you want to earn money, the only way you get is the growth in residential property, because you don't get the income, and if you have residential property, you will agree with me that residential property means that gross rent. It is not the net rent. Gross rent means tenant just pay the rent, and the landlord, the owner, will pay the rates, insurance and maintenance and all land tax. Everything will be paid by the landlord. So after deducting all these expenses, and then on top of that you pay the mortgage, you are negative cash flow. You are losing money. So the only way you make money in residential property is that growth. Now the problem is that the growth is only on paper. For that you have to sell that property to get the growth, to get the actual income. And now to sell that, it has some other implications, such as like you have to pay the tax, you have to pay the selling cost and all sort of things. So it is not a long-term investment for a money-making thing. It will not make money. In residential property, people buy because more of an emotion, before to tell people that, hey, I want 3 residential properties or 5 residential properties, is good to tell, but it is not going to make money. It is not going to, and particularly in today's day and age where things are becoming more and more tougher for a landlord and becoming easier for tenant, it is over a period of time, if you see 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, with the inflation, it is not going to make as much money. And particularly if you're holding it, you have to keep on holding it, you have to keep fixing things. It is not. Your primary focus when you buy a residential property, investment property, is to provide accommodation. Like you are solving a housing crisis, I understand, but not from the money making point of view. The money making point of view, then you need to think about the commerce, then you need to think about business, then you need to think about the commercial property. So that is the fundamental, like you need to focus, because commercial property, who are these tenants? These are the business people. They are happy to pay a little bit more rent because they are doing the business, they are making money. If they are making 30% year on year, they would be happy to give you 8%, 10% return, because they're making 30%. So which is why these commercial businessmen, they don't want to buy that building and then do the business, because they want to redeploy this capital to their business and make more money rather than investing in that. Whereas you as a passive investor, so it's kind of a win-win situation when you buy a commercial property. Versus residential property, it is always, in my opinion, is a win-lose situation. Tenant wins more because they have rights and all, and even though they don't pay, they just move out kind of things, and tenant and the owner is always losing money. Now government made in such a way that yes, you get negative gearing benefits, if you sell then you need to pay tax and all. It is made in such a way that it will keep you in the job forever. So if you bought like 2 or 3 or 4 residential properties, then that means, and you have, let's say 60-70% LVR, 80% LVR you took, that means it will keep you in the job forever. There is no way you get financial independence of buying 3, 4, 5 residential properties. That's just not possible. If anybody is saying that, they are just lying to you. I don't think it is possible. On the other side, you can just buy 1 or 2 commercial properties, and over a period of time you will see that the commercial properties is going to give you financial independence. Even just 2 properties, it is possible to become financially independent. Why? Because commercial property, remember, all the outgoings, all the rates, insurance and everything, that will be paid by the tenant, not the owner. Owner will get that complete net rent, and that is how commercial property is so lucrative. So commercial property, similarly, just like residential, you are solving a housing crisis. In commercial property, you need to think about you are solving a business problem. So the fundamental remains the same. Here you are solving a housing crisis, not to earn money. Commercial property, here you are solving a business problem, but to make money. You make money. Nobody is investing into commercial property to lose money. I'm yet to find somebody who is investing into commercial property and saying that I am happy to lose money. No. But I am always finding people who are buying residential properties and they are continuously losing money, and they're happy for that. So fundamentally, if you see that there is not much difference, underlying difference between residential property and commercial property, but there is a significant difference in terms of the which asset class, like which property is going to give you money or which property is going to make you money and which one is not. Residential property is not going to give you. The only way you will get it is you have to sell that property to make money or to earn money. And in commercial property, you don't have to sell. Once you buy, you will keep it forever. For the rest of your life, you will keep that property, or even generation after generation. Why? Because it is going to continuously rent it out. It is going to continuously make money, and it is doing the business. Why would you sell? You will sell something which is not performing well, or you will sell something like, let's say, you have $1 million, 2 or 3 assets, maybe you want to sell all 3 and you want to go to a bigger asset, you want to play in a bigger game. So there are so many creative ways you can uplift your rent. You can do things which can, you can redevelop. There are so many things that you can do in commercial property. You can in residential as well, but the limits are very, very low. And with the restrictions that residential property has, and it's getting more and more, it is going to be very, very difficult. So fundamentally it is the same, but money making machine is commercial property, not the residential property. Hopefully this video helps and opens up why commercial and why it is you should be interested into commercial property. If you find this videos helpful, do like this video, subscribe my channel and turn the notification bell on. It helps me a lot. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you next time. Bye bye.